what's up? Welcome to another video upload from Aspie with Attitude. If you're watching this for the first time, my name is David. I have autism, I'm from Melbourne, Australia, have speech difficulty, a speech impairment, and a speech impairment, have Asperger's syndrome, and that's why I call myself an Aspie. And I'd like to welcome to this video upload. And before I get into this video upload, I explained back in episode 67, which was 2nd of August 2019, how I used to be a train buff. For this video upload, I've decided to actually make this an outside video as well as be on the couch at home. Just where I actually did episode 147, which was Walk With Me at the Donelan Homestead site. You're going to check this episode out just to see location. And for this video upload, it's not about the location that I'm in. I'm here to talk about trains. Okay, first off, that's when I was actually from 13 years old, pretty much up to when I was 21 years old. I used to actually be a train enthusiast, and from the age of 15 up to 21, also used to be into model railway. And my favourite type of trains at the time were the Australian trains. And my favourite type of Australian trains were the suburban trains that ran on overhead wires. And out of every trains in Australia at the time, even go back in the 90s, actually I used to love the double-decker trains. And okay, first off, just to give you a rundown, I'll be talking about Sydney back in the 90s. There used to be this one particular double-decker train. It used to be called City Rails at the time, which was called the Tangara. The Tangara train was actually being built in 1987 and brought into service in 1988 on the Sydney train lines. And the word Tangara is a traditional landowners and their indigenous term meaning to go, named after the Aboriginal people based around Sydney. And it used to be in between the lower deck windows and the upper deck windows. It used to have this shiny, glassy kind of panel that said Tangara, which actually was the most modern, most sophisticated train of the late 80s and the early 90s. And it used to be fully air conditioned, and it just looked different from all the other silver trains that they were running in Sydney at the time. Well, this is all going back, say, from 88, maybe throughout the 90s, up till 2001. And since these trains were all in Sydney, and the question is, I was living in Melbourne at the time. Could it be possible that Melbourne would have a Sydney Tangara? The answer is no, because the Sydney Tangara, well, that's a Sydney train. However it is, there was a train that looked exactly like a Sydney Tangara, which is called the Melbourne Double Deck and Development Design, and just abbreviated, it's called the 4D units, which actually made to match all the other trains at the time, which was the 70s train called the Hitachi Silver Train, and also the 80s air-conditioned train called the Command Super Train. So at the time when I'm in this video, that's when the Command Super Train was being decommissioned to make way for the highest capacity train. So anyway, this is not about those other single deck trains. I'm just talking about how Melbourne used to have a double decker train. And it was only just a 1 4-car unit. Since throughout the late 80s and the early 90s, Sydney was bringing their Tangaras, which is a new type of double-decker train that was being added into the Sydney service. And it was decided back in 1991 to increase the capacity of amount of passengers to be carried on each train line. Melbourne tried to adopt the Sydney idea of bringing double-decker trains into Melbourne as well, just to increase the passenger capacity. So like, as it did happen back in December 1991, the first and the only double-decker trains that Melbourne had actually finally rolled in from Newcastle. And as it happens though, like, it was only delivered in bits and pieces, just like Lego. And pretty much before they even unveiled and revealed that Melbourne was going to have the double-decker trains like the Sydney Tangaras, they had to pull all together. And once it was put together, it was unveiled back in December 1991, the Melbourne's first and only double-decker trains. And pretty much at that time, for the first few months, it just went through an array of test runs. Since that, a lot of Melburnians were actually, at the time, even getting excited that Melbourne were actually getting the double-decker trains just like Sydney. And as it happens, on the 7th of March 1992, it actually had the fun run. And the purpose of the fun run was just taking people in general on board, just like a VIP trip for all the train enthusiasts at the time. And it wasn't until the 10th of March 1992 they've decided to bring this into regular service, and they're only going to make 4 trips on that day, on the 10th of March 1992. Instead, it only just made the one. And what happened at Camberwell station was, it actually broke down, and so like they had to sort of like really kind of like fine tune it just to make sure it works. Since at the time, that's actually been a very, very bad sign for Melbourne, as it's meant to be kept up north of the border in Sydney for double-decker trains. Well, anyway, at least we can just see how Melbourne's having to go at having a double-decker trains just like Sydney is. So after a few days though, like, it just fell into service. And the biggest problem with the double-decker trains in Melbourne is it was only confined to the Belgrave and Lilydale line, and that was supposed to be for the Glen Waverley, the Eltham and the Hurstbridge line at a time. And the only reason why it couldn't do the Hurstbridge or Eltham line at the time was, at Jolimont, there was actually like a railway tunnel, and that was made for single decks. So like, the tunnel was too low, the train was too high, and it was a multi-million-dollar operation to actually even to fit the double-decker trains for the Jolimont tunnel, considering that it did work with the City Loop. Since at the time it only had 3 underground stations, which they called Flagstaff, Museum and Parliament at the time. And there was an order for another 19 more of these double-decker trains. So first thing it would have to done is, would have had to succeeded, which it never did. And when Jeff Kennett came into power in 1992, he cancelled the contract for the extra 19 double-decker trains that was required. And however, it is though, like, it only lasted 10 years in service, and it was until the 22nd of February 2002 they decided to permanently take the train out of service, and it never made a return back in a Melbourne service at all. So like, it was just actually kept in storage, taken to the pastures, and it was until 26th of March 2006 that double-decker train was scrapped. And at the time though, like, some people might think it was just a bit of a myth for Melbourne to be running a train like a Sydney Tangara, which it actually did, considering that there's actually a lot of proof, and it's known to a lot of Melbourne train buffs and train enthusiasts that actually did happen. From my personal experience with these double-decker trains, I did have kind of a bit of emotional attachment to these trains. It all pretty much started when it first came into service from day one, and when it was brought in. I remember seeing this on the Channel 7 News back in December 1991. Oh, Melbourne's getting a double-decker train. I thought, oh, this is absolutely cool. Pretty much I can remember that was all at the same time when I had a session of going to places like this, picking wild plums. And it was the end of 1992. My father actually stopped me from going to places like this, since I'm actually in snake territory. So like, there's actually going to be snakes around, and that's how dangerous it is. So like, I was stopped, and the only way I can actually get over it was to once and for all get that Melbourne double-decker train. And like, it used to be a bit of a daydream, and I used to have dreams about being on that train. Like, I used to treat it like it was just like a sole purpose in life to be on that train, which there was nothing special about these trains. And that's what my mum and my dad told me about this. This is all going back to when I was 13 years old, back in 1993. And that's when I first started getting interested into trains. So like, it was until May 1993, it was the first time that I actually caught that double-decker train. And I can actually remember, I was at Belgrave Station going to school, and as soon as I saw the double-decker train rolling behind the 3 single-deck trains, which was the common super trains, I can remember I was actually frolicking down the platform, like frolicking, getting all excited that, oh yes, I finally got double-decker trains. And I can remember the door actually opened automatically in front of me, and just basically bolted up onto the top floor, and that really made my day that time. And I only really got a chance to get that train for probably about 6 times before it was no longer running in that particular time slot, when I actually really wanted to get a double-decker train every morning. And I was hoping that there was going to be more, but I'm afraid that was the only one. And pretty much, I haven't really got the Melbourne 4D units since the 15th of August 1993. And how did it go? Then a month later, I took a trip to Sydney, and here it is again. And I can remember there was a big glass panelling that said Tangara. So anyway, so like, yeah, I couldn't believe that I saw so many of these double-decker trains exactly like the one in Melbourne. And that really made me want to go to Sydney all the time. And pretty much though, like, it made me want to pretty much go back to the old life. And pretty much, I remember even as a little kid, when I was about 4, 5, 6 years old, and I can remember going to school when my mum used to clean up, and I used to actually see the red leaves and the green leaves being side by side. Well, anyway, that's just contradicting. So it was just all about thinking about, like, wishing that I actually lived in Sydney when my family was more happier, and everything like that too. So I used to keep going out to Sydney all the time, getting these Sydney Tangaras. And it wasn't until January 1997, I decided to go down to a train museum that day. And what made me want to get these Melbourne double-decker trains is, after seeing that poster being advertised at French Gully Station, I used to always stare at that poster. More I stared at that poster, more I wanted to actually get that double-decker train. And it started getting double-decker trains again in Melbourne, which was just the 4D units. And since it made a regular service throughout the 90s, I remember back in 1998 how I used to be kind of dressed like this, except I can remember that I used to wear the Adidas snap pants with buttons on the side like all cool kids wore. And I used to always love to get double-decker trains on my Walkman, listen to BC Boys and Run DMC, which was in 1998. That's when I first started getting into hip-hop actually. Just listening to Run DMC and the BC Boys on my Walkman, sitting on the top floor of a Melbourne double-decker trains. And one thing that no one probably has ever done in Australia, which I did back in June 2001, I was going to be flying up to Sydney for the June long weekend that I had, so I was 21 years old at the time. To get to the airport, I remember getting off at Box Hill, and I actually got the Melbourne double-decker train, which is the 4D units. So like, I took that train from Box Hill to what was called Spencer Street at the time, got off, took a bus to Tullamarine Airport, and at the time, Ansett was running. So like, I remember I flew from Melbourne to Sydney, and when I got to Sydney, I went to the domestic terminal station, and the train that came after the Melbourne 4D units was actually Sydney Tangara. So like, I'm probably the first and the only person on the planet who's managed to get the Melbourne 4D double-decker trains and the Sydney Tangara all in the same day, which is absolutely cool. And I can still remember that was on the 22nd of February 2002. Before they permanently withdrew the double-decker trains, I was literally the last passenger to ever disembark from that Melbourne double-decker train before they decided to scrap it. And the double-decker train was scrapped on the 26th of March 2006. And so I can remember the second last time that I actually did get a double-decker train in Melbourne. I've explained this back in episode 186 when I was speed up. So like the night before that I got attacked at a nightclub, I actually did get that Melbourne double-decker train. So anyway, this is just my story about the double-decker trains. So anyway, like, please let me know in the comments what you really think about that Melbourne having the double-decker trains. And if you didn't believe that Melbourne ever had a double-decker trains like a Sydney Tangara, now you hear it. And at a time when I was actually filming this video, the Melbourne train service was withdrawing these air-conditioned common super trains in exchange for the high-capacity trains, which is now the new king of the Melbourne rails. So, as it turned out to be, that big giant double-decker train was an elephant in the room for the Melbourne train service. So obviously it's been scrapped. After the scrapping of the Melbourne double-decker train, I just wonder if they ever sold the actual stainless steel off to Elon Musk for SpaceX, for him to actually build the starships that will eventually go to Mars. And however so, I know there'll be no more double-decker trains in Melbourne. You'll never know. Maybe there'll be electric double-decker buses made out of stainless steel, ran by Tesla perhaps. So how cool would that be? Especially, I'd love to see this for Route 901, which is between Frankston and Melbourne Airport. Oh, they'll actually make a real cool double-decker bus service here in Melbourne. Pretty much the same kind of spirit as the old double-decker trains you've been seeing through this whole entire video content from Aspie with Attitude. And also, I've always had another idea. Anytime soon, Sydney will probably be decommissioning their Tangara trains. Maybe, what if that one of the motor Tangara carriages could be shipped down to Northern Williamstown Railway Museum, and they could actually make it like the 5th double-decker train carriage to be born in Victoria, but this time, just to make sure that the Melbourne double-decker train has been preserved and it has been scrapped like it was in the year 2006. Well, anyway, it's just kind of sad now that this train's pretty much gone for good, and you just don't know what you have till it's gone. And maybe there could be a bit of a crowdfunding in getting that one Tangara carriage from Sydney down to Melbourne, just to preserve that Melbourne double-decker train. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel from Aspie with Attitude. Also, don't forget to ring this notification bell to keep up to date with Aspie with Attitude. And if you really love following my videos and you like what I do, please don't forget to give it a good like and share this with your friends, with your family, to the autistic community, to other people who actually like trains. And also, I'd like to give a shout out to one of my dedicated viewers, which is called I'm All Abroad. So like, if I've got a name wrong, so I know he's been calling me Aspire with Attitude instead of Aspie with Attitude. So I know he did a video on these Melbourne double-decker train, which I'll leave the link at the end of this in the description down below, and also the list of thumbnails at the end if you sit through special effects. And also, out of all Melbourne train buffs, I reckon the coolest train buffs in all of Melbourne is the Train Man. Yeah, such an awesome dude. Yeah, shout outs to the Train Man. I also could offer other shout outs to Chris Gordon and Gareth Ludson, since I had been using their photos to make this video so possible. Just talking about my story and Melbourne's story about how they once had the double-decker train, and also use some video uploads from, I think it's called Mick V, I think his name was. Yeah, shout out to him. And also for the music soundtrack, I actually used Evan Davidson's theme song for Girl From Tomorrow. So this kind of reminds me of the times when I did used to get the Melbourne double-decker train frequently, because I remember getting it one day, coming home after school, turning on the TV and just watching that show, A Girl From Tomorrow. Oh, just the theme song kind of reminds me of back in those days, back in 1993. So like this is how my video content ends with it, and thanks for watching, thanks for listening to Aspie with Attitude, peace and respect, and see you next time.